right, everyone, I think we're drifting back. I have a few questions. Yes, thank you. Thank you, folks, for dropping those in. This is one of my favorite parts of the evening. I feel like we really start to get rolling with the conversation, and then it always ends, and I'm like, please continue having this conversation elsewhere. Yes, more. Excellent. I'm going to start with a question for Anne. I feel like folks might think they know World Savvy and what it does, but it sounds like there's some fresh thinking happening, new ideas. Tell us some more about what that looks like.
Well, before I start, I just have to say that Cole has cooler shoes on than I do.
Thanks, Dad. He doesn't know. I took them.
You won. You won on that front. So yes, actually, World Savvy is a 23-year-old organization. We were founded 23 years ago, right after 9/11. That is part of our organization's founding story. But our work has changed a ton over that time. So we're a national nonprofit. We do our work with districts and schools all across the country, but we're super biased towards Minnesota and Minneapolis because this is where we're headquartered. We have a regional structure underneath our national umbrella. So I have the honor and joy of leading our Midwest work, but we also have a West Coast team and a newly formed East Coast team as well. The work that we did for most of our organization's history, which might be the work that some of you are familiar with, was actually helping to support the kinds of changes that I talked about, but at an individual teacher level, and then actually also at the student level. So we had programming that was supporting youth, and then programming that was supporting teachers through coaching, but individual teacher coaching. So we were working with teachers that might be, in a smattering of different schools. With the work that we were trying to get at, not really bubbling up to a grade level team, let alone, influencing school-wide teaching and learning practices. So in 2019, as an organization, great timing, right before the pandemic, we made a really bold model shift to, instead of our work looking like that impact that was powerful and important and resulting in change, but at that individual teacher level, we made a huge shift, and now our work looks like partnerships with schools and districts. So a World Savvy partnership, if you are in the position of leading a school or are in a position of influencing district leadership, I would love to talk to you because that is where now World Savvy partnerships are activated at, which means for individual educators, something that I believe is ultimately more impactful, because the heart of World Savvy's work is still coaching of individual educators in a school partnership, though we're working wall to wall across the school. Typically in our comprehensive partnerships, working for 3 years as a capacity building partner. We don't work in schools or districts in perpetuity, but trying to seed the kinds of changes that then from there a school will see on sustainably on their own, but we're able to drive that change, yes, with individual educators, but also influencing the systems of teaching and learning and school environments that are holding it all together. So, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. We have a series of questions from different folks on belonging, Cole. There's two that are somewhat related. I might squish them together. Forgive me, people who ask these. Have you seen anything that successfully creates more belonging? What are some examples? And then the other one was related to that example piece. What are some of the experiences of youth that shared of things done to enhance their sense of belonging in schools that are growing in the area of inclusivity? So examples, places where that sense of belonging, creating that sense of belonging was successful.
Yeah, so I suppose I'll start out with, what's the first one again?
Was some examples of successfully creating a sense of belonging.
Okay. Example, or I thought there was one more, it was more like...
There is a piece of it, it's like inclusivity, that was a different question.
Okay.
I smashed them together.
Well, I'll tell you, first off, good examples, I would say, and probably biased, but the Circle of Courage is not just for schools, but it's also for organizations who work with schools. At Bridgemakers, the example I'm going to give you, of course, is that we are the people that we serve, right? So young people who have gone through these different life experiences, those are the folks we're trying to serve. Those are the folks leading the organization. That sort of brings a sense of belonging. There's some special sauce that we have when we go to speak into a school because the young people are not already putting up those defenses by way of us being an adult, right? We're older than them. Boom, that immediately sets up a wall there. So again, another school that's done this great, High School for the Recording Arts, right? Why? Because they actually let their students make real decisions that impact the school. They let their students come up with lesson plans. One of the coaches that was a part of Bridgemakers, Haben Geber-Gergish, is a master of this. I mean, seriously, she's really good at it because she lets her students decide how they want to come at a certain standard, right? And they get to kind of build that curriculum with the teacher as a guide. So I think the other one was like, that other question I was really intrigued by.
Do you want to hear it again?
Yeah, what was that?
Okay. What are some of the experiences of youth that shared of things done to enhance their sense of belonging in schools that are growing in the area of inclusivity?
Yeah. So one of the things that's super important is, number one, enhancing a sense of belonging, again, starts with this idea of care. And, I think one of the things that I hear from young people all the time is they say, teachers don't care about me. And then you go, well, okay, well, of course we care, right? We care. We want them to succeed. We want them to this, that. But where we fail is, from the young person's perspective, we're only coming at us, I want you to get good grades. I want you to this. I want you to that at an academic level. They think that we only care about them as a number and as a success metric than a whole human. That's where we're messing up. So of course we're caring, but you need to get under that first, because young people are incredibly skeptical by the time they're in like 6th grade, honestly. And so if they're in like 9th grade, dude, you've got a really battle-hardened person that you have to get through. And the only way to do that is to ask questions, listen, know that they're not going to give you the answer that you want right away. They'll probably make fun of you first if they're a battle-hardened 9th grader. But like my mentor, John, he showed me that he cared about me because the first time that, we hung out, it wasn't about Bridgemakers or strategy or like this, that. He didn't have any agenda. He just took me out to dinner and he said, how are things going? I was an open book at that point because he didn't ask me about anything that necessarily benefited him. He just cared about me. So that's number one. And then the other thing I'd say, we need to start early. Like, by the time we're in 9th grade, they're so traumatized by the system already because no one has asked them what they think about how things are going, in the school. We're just asking about, did you turn in that assignment? I mean, they're so skeptical by this point. And you can't blame them, right? So, I mean, really, all of this stuff needs to start early, middle school before in starting belonging. And trust me, middle schoolers have a lot to say, so it's not hard to start conversations there.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
So at World Savvy, one of the most powerful tools for creating belonging that we've found is storytelling. So this past year, we have had the opportunity to bring under the World Savvy umbrella a bunch of teacher resources and frameworks for storytelling that were created by a small nonprofit called The Wildling, if anyone in the room is familiar with them.
They were a fiscally sponsored project of Springboard for the Arts.
Cool. Yeah, amazing, like an amazing team and remarkable set of resources that can help educators in your classroom, regardless of what the lesson is that you're teaching, honestly, what the content area is, or the particular standards outcome that you're aiming for. You can use these resources and embed storytelling into your classroom, which allows for youth, through what they know, which is themselves, to share, and also in the process of that, allowing for other classmates through listening to other stories understand more about the perspectives and differences of others.
Excellent. Related question on the leader's side, and I feel like you maybe touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the answer for the last question, but this is for Cole and also for Anne. Where do you recommend leaders start when searching for belonging / building belonging in their environments? Parentheses, it can be hard if this is a new concept.
I'm sort of going to reiterate some of the things I said, but I'll be a little more, specific. As a leader or a teacher or whatever, start with one young person who really needs it, right? And you're going to know they really need it because they, again, have that wall up in front of them. They, might only give you 1-2 word answers to anything that you say. It might just be on their phone, head down the rest of the time. Go find that young person who really needs it, really needs belonging. And I mean start with one, right? Because the thing is, you sort of have to infiltrate. I don't know, it might be the wrong word, but you do. You have to kind of infiltrate. As the adult, you got to kind of, you got to be valid, as we say, all right? You got to start with one young person, really show them that you care. Now, what happens when you've created belonging with that one person, that one young person between, the teacher and the student, whatever, is that actually that's your secret weapon for the rest of them, okay? Because now it's about peer mentorship, not just necessarily, the adult wagging the finger. Now you have, again, the ultimate way to break down those defensive barriers is another young person talking to another young person. When it's coming from another, then it's not as intimidating, right? So I would say, yeah, as a leader, it's like start with that one young person who really needs it. By the time you've helped them figure out their purpose and showed them you care, dude, they're going to be an active, natural advocate of that sort of thing.
I love that, Cole. Thank you. I might offer, so there's a saying that one of my colleagues at World Savvy says, which is, it's hard to learn something if you already know. So I might offer as a starting point suggestion to the educator who asked this of if you're seeking to create belonging in your classroom, of starting by practicing curiosity about what are the interests and backgrounds and things that are making young people in my classroom tick that I might not naturally know because I'm not of their generation and I don't necessarily have the same interests of them. So starting with that curiosity and assuming that you don't have the answer. We're hosting an event, and I'll share this with Heidi. She can send it in the follow-up email because I didn't think of it until just now. I could have put it on a slide. But we're hosting a event next week as an organization that I would welcome anyone to attend that's interested in this topic. That is going to highlight a speaker and author whose name is Mark Perna. And he's done a bunch of writing and work around generational difference, and specifically who are this generation of young people, and what do we as adults need to pause and seek to understand and practice mental flexibility around in order to create the space for their leadership to be amplified. And so anyone who is in that space of trying really hard to understand how do I decenter myself as an adult and really get more into what are the motivators of the young people that I'm teaching, I would encourage to come. It'll be a great talk with some good takeaways. But then also, we will have young people there. It'll be a discussion, so the talk will segue into intergenerational dialogues at tables where young people can share their own perspective about this topic, as we should be allowing the space for.
Excellent. And both of you have mentioned events tonight, so I'm hoping that we can make sure that those get into the resources that Heidi will send out after the event. Anne, question for you. What physical or facilities considerations are important for the future of ed? What are our learning spaces like in the future, I'm guessing? Yeah.
I think the first response I want to give is I don't want to let a vision for a physical space stand in the way of, to repeat what Cole had said earlier, the small steps that need to happen now towards that big change. And for me personally, having been in K-12 education and trying to like see big things happen for a while, I wonder too often if we're waiting for the like beautiful new space, like the bond to be passed that allows for us to fund the new building so that we can design the perfect classroom where students are then going to be able to collaborate. But I can't yet do it yet. I can't break my students into small groups yet because my physical classroom, it was designed in the 60s and it's just not set up for that. So I think that's the first like thing that's coming up for me is I would encourage us to think past like physical space and instead actually look to what the heart of schools is about, which is about relationships, school environment, what is the culture that we're creating that is space agnostic, that is physical space agnostic, and also what is the teaching and learning that is happening and what is the vision for teaching and learning that we're centered around, which I won't repeat because I talked a lot about that in my talk. I think we need to make a shift from content-focused standards as the goal to essential skills as the goal. I haven't given, so beyond that, I haven't given physical space a ton of thought, but I have been in schools in the Midwest in my work that I think are spaces that more naturally allow for teachers to step into the kinds of teaching and learning that I was talking about. The spaces that are like coming into my mind are spaces where there's the school I was just at in Ohio that it didn't have traditional walls. It was actually like the classrooms, you could pull the walls apart, which allowed for like different ways of classrooms being organized. What that school is trying to do is break out of traditional kind of grade level groupings. So I think that kind of space allows for that. I think increasingly I'm seeing like spaces that are new school designs that are like great lighting and like awesome like green space connected to the school, like recognizing we're whole humans. And so those kinds of things are important. Like let's not build more buildings that are concrete wall, like structures. Yeah, some of those kinds of things, I think. And then, of course, the thing that hasn't been mentioned a ton here, but is technology is going to be a huge enabler of changes in the way that kids are taught. And so classrooms that easily allow for students to probably be doing some learning on devices through, a teaching that is like AI enabled, that is highly individualized to what the particular needs are of a student, while there still should always be space for students to come together in community. So spaces that are flexible to allow for all of that different kinds of learning to happen.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. Yeah, like I just agree with you, Anne, in the sense of like, there are some things that are helpful. That whole rows of chairs looking at one whiteboard stuff is just done, bro. That stuff is bogus. Like we gotta like, let's grow up, right? I mean, sure, we're watching a movie, but no, that's not, again, that's a two-dimensional way of learning. So yeah, sure. I mean, I could say, circles or, I mean, even this is better, tables, right? Folks can look at each other and whatever. Anyway, but then what I would say is that we're focusing too much on the physical space, right? If you really want to know my answer, get outside. Stop, screw the building. I mean, not screw the building, okay, you need a building, but stop putting so much emphasis on the building. These four walls are where learning happens. No, it ain't. It ain't the only place that learning happens, okay? And I mean, there are policy challenges that we really have to go up against to change that sort of thing. And obviously, it's like, I mean, there's liability and all this stuff, but God, we have to get outside. We have to get into the real world, and we have to start learning with our eyes, ears, mouth, and just everything, all of the five senses, rather than I'm just gonna look at this paper, I'm in the learning walls, that's not how it goes. So yeah.
There's a lot of schools that are doing cool stuff with career-connected learning that I feel like relates to some of what you're saying, of like learning. Part of like what this question is making me think about is the mental model that we need to break out of is like learning happens here in this space, and instead Like I know for me, like a lot of my learning, it happened through internships and jobs that I had. And I think a lot of schools are trying to think really critically about how to make more of those experiences possible for young people.
Excellent. You all are leading the segue into the next few questions with your responses. Cole, you mentioned policy. So there's a question, what education, finance, and policy changes are needed in order to transform school systems to create future-ready global citizens? So I think it's both of you. This sounds like a question for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that I'm gonna just disclaimer is I'm not about to spit out like an actual drafted bill language right now. Okay, I'm not that. I don't have the answer like that. But there are some things I'll say that we need to start focusing on and grappling with and bringing young people into the conversation on, which is what we're doing. Again, quick plug. All right, June 15th. But number one is again how schools are funded. Right now we're incentivized to keep students in seats. We're incentivized to get them in the building and then keep them in a seat for as long as possible to pay our administrators and teachers and all the other stuff, right? Okay, lovely. Why don't we actually incentivize schools, align the funding with the incentives that we want, and we base the funding on how well you're providing belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity for our students and teaching them, to be the healthy, capable, confident citizens we need them to be. So there we go. How about that? You want the money, you do your job. I think that's how like the world works. So anyway, and that goes just to say, follow the money and you'll find the incentive, right? The incentives are just wrong. They're just not quite right. And so I would start with that. I would start with how are we funding schools?
So I started my career as an educator, so I wasn't always interested in education policy. But I feel like the longer that I've been trying to lead movement, the more interested I've become in what kinds of policy might need to be in place in order to open up more innovation. The policy that right now I'm most interested in for Minnesota is actually not going to happen because it was not included in the education omnibus, but I'm hopeful for next year, so I'm going to go ahead and mention it, which is a bill that was being driven forward by Mary Frances Clardy, and it was a bill that was offering two things. A different definition around what a student has to do in order to get a credit, which right now is basically linked to seat time instead of mastery of the thing that the credit is for. So that we need to change that to the earlier point, allowing then if credit wasn't linked to seat time in isolation, it would allow for more learning to happen through the diverse ways that Cole was talking about. And then the second thing that the bill would have done, and hopefully it'll see light again, would have put some small amount of funding up for districts to step into the space of some work around student-centered learning. Because I think right now, while I don't, it's not just about funding, I do feel like districts will be more incented to make some of these starting with small shifts happen towards student-centered personalized learning if there's dedicated funding to allow them to do that.
And you inspired me on 5 different levels there, so I'm going to jump a little bit more into it. Again, this is not this is going to take time, but exactly how I would actually come at this and how we are coming at this. You said it earlier, but we need to get away from content-based and get into fundamental skills-based. So we need to teach our young people the fundamental things that won't change, right? I mean, if you think about it, every generation is going to have different problems, but it never changes? The fact that we got problems. That never goes away. That's like a human thing, okay? That's a life thing. And so problem solving is one of those fundamental things. Learning how to learn is one of those fundamental things. Another thing that's weird is, have you guys noticed how our entire job really consists of just like taking in and then reorganizing and expressing ideas? That is communication, is one of those, again, foundational things, which takes me to another point. We should be grading based on demonstration of the things learned. Demonstration in many different ways. This can be verbal. Some kids really are good writers. Some kids want to make a video. Some kids are going to like build the thing, right? But again, the way we currently do it is, can you remember enough of the binary yes or no questions to pass the thing? Now, yes, there's sometimes writing assignments and all that, but again, a lot of it is like binary code. We're like throwing them through this machine.
That's actually one of the things that gives me a lot of hope. So I'm seeing more districts and schools that are stepping into competency-focused grading. A lot of that, those stories it started with an educator or group of educators that tried this in their classroom, of saying, like, it doesn't have to look like the traditional A to F report card, and have made the shifts and then are bubbling it up to their school teams. An example of a district that's a World Savvy partner district that is doing this is St. Anthony, New Brighton. And that was how their really whole shift towards competency-focused classrooms started, was like teachers beginning with, okay, let's figure out what might it look like for us to incorporate some of these essential skills into the way that grading looks. How might we, in addition to measuring student mastery on these standard dimensions, also be giving students feedback, like on their report card, on how they're communicating or collaborating with their peers?
Excellent. Y'all are making me feel really good about my child's public Montessori school right now. I keep shuffling questions because I'm like, oh, we're touching on this. I want to get to this. But there is a question something that you just touched on, Anne, that says, is there a middle ground where school teaches both global competence and technological and creative expertise / development?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is a both and answer almost always. And I think in education, this is part of the behavior that we really have to stop, which is searching for the silver bullet of it has to be this thing, this is the solution. Classrooms that look this exact way, that is I don't know, the light at the end of the tunnel, or the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I just don't feel like that's true. In most classrooms and most schools, it's a little bit of both and. So how can you both center global competence and be incorporating what right now are a lot of tools that teachers probably should be experimenting with, that AI is enabling? I actually don't see those things, by the way, also as mutually exclusive. Part of what World Savvy brings into our work with educators is a whole lot of resources and tools that can allow for educators to leverage some of those capabilities. But we talk about global competence as an organizing framework, that all the initiatives that are constantly being thrown at schools, whether that is academic rigor or diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, or name the initiative, educators in the room, that has been thrown at you. And what I see global competence as is really the overarching thing that can hold all those other things. Yeah.
Cool. Related question. In the early grades, K through 2, how do you recommend finding a balance between explicit instruction of fundamental skills, example, learning to read, versus having students lead learning efforts? You may have already answered it, but...
Yeah. I actually think that elementary classrooms are oftentimes the most naturally exemplar. I'm looking actually at one of our World Savvy professional learning facilitators, our coaches, Molly, who's here, and she is an experienced elementary teacher herself, and coaches a lot of elementary teachers. So you can tell me afterward, Molly, if you'd agree or disagree with this response, but I feel like elementary classrooms in a lot of ways are classrooms that teachers are more kind of naturally putting at the center these ways of wanting students to be. There in a lot of elementary classrooms are a lot of small group work happening. There's usually a lot of student dialogue that's happening, almost too much sometimes. And I think, honestly, where I see that happening less is sometimes at the secondary level, where teachers tend to be more focused on a content and area and a subject matter expertise, and they are subject matter experts, but are then needing to just broaden the lens to be not only centered around that subject area expertise or that content, but also all of these other things that we're trying to give students ritual practice of happening in the classroom.
Cool. Go ahead.
So I couldn't read until third grade, and now my writing skills pay my salary and several other folks. So, what happened there was in fourth grade, I got a computer and went on Wikipedia for the first time, right? Because I think it was explicit instruction, and then what was the other thing there?
I dropped it.
Oh, no worries. What was it? Yeah.
Learning to read
Yeah.
versus student-led learning. Was that the second part of the question?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And I think that's a good question to ask, but then you gotta kind of question that question there. Explicit instruction, right? It's so much easier to explicitly instruct when the young person has asked you for it, right? And then it's actually gonna land and stick. So the thing is if you start them off with the things that we talked about and building belonging and helping them discover for themselves who they are, they won't shut up about asking you things, because that's where you want to get to. There's an element of faith here where you have to realize that once you've instilled in them the confidence that they're free to be who they want to be, and that their actual time in school here is spent figuring out who that person is and what they want to contribute to the world and all that, and that it's about them. Oh yeah, you'll be explicitly instructing all day, because if not yourself looking stuff up, because they'll probably trip you up a few times. But that's how I would say it, is like flip it around, because like they will get there. I got that Wikipedia, dude. I know more about the Ottoman Empire than I probably should. Okay, and that's just how it goes. I was interested.
I love it. Love it. Are these, I feel like I saw Fergus Falls up on the slides for the conversations that were happening. So somebody asked, are these ideas conversations considering students in rural Minnesota?
Yes, that's the point. So yes, we've done these in urban, suburban, and rural communities very, very, very intentionally, because if we're going to use young people's voices in legislative policy at the state level, we need to reflect the entire state of Minnesota. And the other thing that I want to say, you touched on this earlier very beautifully, and this is also kind of the thing about the space idea, is it's very important to consider, but on a place-by-place basis. Okay, what works in one community ain't going to work in the next, per se. It might, but allow people, groups of folks, communities, the autonomy to sort of decide how their learning community is going to look like, right? So that is why these conversations are sort of held in this way. We're sort of, these are the overarching themes, right? But we also have the data on each individual community, because, the policy change and the resources aren't all 100%, state directed and all that. So I'm a huge advocate of sort of, as much as we possibly can, again, with those overarching fundamental skills, of course, in mind, but then sort of as much as we can allowing individual communities to sort of co-create what that experience is going to look like. So absolutely, the answer to that question is it has to.
Anything you want to add in?
Beautifully said, Cole.
Excellent. Maybe somewhat related. One of the last questions we'll do, because I know that there's an event at 7:30 tonight, so the proverbial saying, you don't have to go home, but you got to get the heck out of here at 7:30 will apply. So I want to make sure we get to as many of these as possible. Related somewhat, can we bridge the labor laws for young agricultural workers? Start at age 12. Does this question, I myself am maybe a little lost in this question, but does it make sense to you?
Well, I think because especially in rural communities, it's pretty regular for kids to be driving tractors at like 12, right? And like working and whatnot.
Younger than that.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say probably even we say 12. Like, well, so that's kind of that's one of those things, right, where we touched on what makes sense for that community, what's representative of that community, because that obviously came from a community where a very, very huge portion. I'm not gonna say obviously. I don't know. This is me speaking from outside of being a part of this community. What I observe is what I'll say, is that a lot of the ways folks are making money and their livelihood is built on is farming, and it's also very important. The family lives on that land. It's important that the family is involved in taking care of that land and doing that. They found out that was a core fundamental value of theirs, and now there's a difference of law reflecting that. So in terms of bridging that, I'd say in the city, that's going to be a big, hairy, audacious goal that I actually am interested in. And whoever asked that, let's talk about it. Okay, cool. But because that's a really good question. I'm gonna be honest. I worked at Sunrise Bicycles down the street, like right down there, and I was like 12, and it was actually a really awesome experience for me. My mom was cool with it. She was like, "Yeah, stop asking me for money." You know what I mean? And then what I was able to do is learn foundational skills there, like customer service, fixing things. I've been interested in machines and all that stuff ever since. So it was an experiential learning moment for me, and I got paid. I had a lot of snacks. I was like the coolest kid. So anyway, I personally think there's a lot of open space for conversation about that, because obviously we have to, child labor laws are in place for a reason. But is there a way where we can actually expose young people to types of work that's interesting to them, relevant to them, and help solve a real problem in the community, right? I think that needs to be explored.
Cool. Anything you want to add,
I
Em?
mean, I just feel like Cole's just warming up here. Like, just keep hitting him with them.
Well, this one will be
I
for
don't
both
have
of
anything
you.
to
Sorry to interrupt. This will be our last question. Where do you see yourselves in 5 years?
That answer is easy for me. When I joined World Savvy, felt like so many of the experiences that I'd had in different parts of education and community have come together under this organization's umbrella. So I hope that I am where I am now, and that I'm continuing to try to share, the message that I shared tonight, and leading this change. But I also hope that it is with a larger portfolio of districts and schools, and in particular, the question around rural communities and how our communities like Fergus Falls showing up. One of the things that attracted me to World Savvy and that I care a lot about, and that 5 years from now I want to see, is that we have, as an organization, an explicit goal around 30% of the districts and schools that we work with being located in rural parts of the country. And that is because of the larger kind of vision that our organization's trying to drive. And we know we can't leave rural communities out of this conversation. And also those, in many cases, at least the district that I attended as a kid, are the places where support is really needed. And so 5 years from now, I hope to be, looking at the different schools that we've been able to impact and see more communities like the community that I grew up in and the one that I taught in reflected.
I think I just realized that my good friends who are in a band together are the ones playing at this next event. That's why I've seen 4 of them walk. Okay, that just hit me. I'm sorry for that tangent, but wow. 5 years? Okay, playing in a band with those guys. No, I'm kidding. For me, 5 years looks like, so I'm a serial entrepreneur is what they called me in the intro.
Didn't you write that bio?
I had help with friends.
Okay.
I was like, what do you guys think of me? And they just, it's kind of funny. But no, so entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, a way to make money, give back to the community, create good jobs, right? That's what I'm all about. So frankly, in 5 years, I would hope to write my first check to Bridgemakers as a charitable donation. On top of that, I want to at least have started building the foundation of, my next moves forward, which will be to spend the rest of my life mentoring and investing cash and resources into, incredible young people and their visions and their nonprofit organizations, businesses, social movements, all those sorts of things. That's what I'll be doing, like kind of youth ventures type vibe. So, I got to say we've done this already too with the incredible, launch of our sister organization, Good Trouble, who I just have to shout out for a second. Come on. So we've already sort of done that of helping other youth organizations get off the ground and started with cash mentorship and strategic development. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm gonna do. And my mom is gonna have a really nice house. Yeah.
Can we come back in 5 years? Share more reflections?
That has happened. That has happened.
My mom will be here like, oh, what's up at the house? What's up? You said it. What's up? You said that. So yeah, I guess hold me to that. If the market holds up, okay, we're gonna.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your presentations. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. And thank you all for joining us this evening.